Hey everyone! Before we open today's file, please make sure to follow us on Instagram at d.s.radio, where you can find all the images that go along with today's case. You can drop us an email at contact.dsradio@gmail.com. You can find all of our socials in the Linktree bio on our Instagram profile, including links to merch. If you're feeling especially generous, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/dystopian simulation radio, where you can get access to our exclusive Instagram page and make suggestions for upcoming episode topics that you would like us to cover. Speaking of Patreon, thanks to our Patreons, Riff Cult, Cropley Crab, Cash Broadus, Raspberry Jr., Jason R. Nelson, Creepy Paper, Jamie Sook, Michael Laughlin, Lindsay Keller, Mike Wright, Greer Weaver, Kelsey Carruthers, Linz Gibbon, Drake Holvig, Only Child, Michael M, Wesley Akers, Riaz K, Emily Medeiros, Pip, Heather Wynn, Graves, Devon Sweatshirt, The Ordained Sinister Minister, and Philip Hoffman. Hi everybody and welcome to Dystopian Simulation Radio. It's me, Linz.
And it's me, not Linz. It's me, Chris.
How's it going, Chris? How are you feeling? What's going on?
I'm good. It's a lovely day out today. It's unusually warm January morning.
We've been disagreeing on this all day. I think it's cold and I'm still wearing my jacket and Chris is just like, it's so boiling.
I'm in board shorts and a t-shirt. No, I'm not.
He's in a backwards 90s cap. He's got a Rude Dog t-shirt on. Well, Chris, it is a lovely day outside, but unfortunately, I do not have a lovely story for you.
Uh-oh.
We received a lot of requests from listeners for more true crime.
Oh, yeah, you asked on the Instagram, right?
Mm-hmm. And people wanted to hear some more true crime.
Okay.
So I have, as you probably know, a particular interest in cold cases, unsolved cases, missing people, things like that. So I thought I would tell you the story of Beth Doe.
Can I just pause for 1 second and say I like how you describe I've got a particular interest in it. I mean, I've just published a book on it.
Yeah.
But like...
Yeah, if you're curious, it's called Have You Seen This Person? And it's on Exposit Books. Now, this case I was researching for my second book, but since it no longer fits the theme because it has been solved, I thought I would share it here with everybody today.
Fantastic.
So yes, it has been solved. So you won't be left, well, you may be left, frustrated at the crime, but you won't be left without a conclusion.
Cool.
To the case. So, I would like to add that listener discretion is advised here as there is descriptions of a pregnant murder victim. So if you would like to skip this episode, please feel free to go back and listen to anything else in our catalogue. We have a bunch of episodes now, so feel free to go back and have a listen. Get cozy, Chris.
Okay.
And let me tell you the story of Beth Doe.
I am ready.
I'm not sure you are, but here we go.
Okay.
It was around 4:30 p.m. on December 20th, 1976, and 14-year-old Kenneth Jumper Jr. had just finished his day at the nearby Weatherly Area School. The winter air was crisp and biting as the teenager checked a trap line that he had set up near the Lehigh River in the small town of Whitehaven in Pennsylvania. The traps were empty. However, a cluster of strange shapes strewn across the snow-covered grass caught his eye. Curious, he approached the nearest object, only to make a discovery so disturbing that it would burn itself into his memory for the rest of his life. Nestled in the grass was the severed head of a young woman, with their ears and nose cut away from the face. Just a stone's throw away, the body of a full-term fetus lay sprawled in the snow. Kenneth ran to his home on Tannery Road as fast as his legs could take him. He reported the findings to his older brother Richard, who in disbelief accompanied Kenneth back to the scene to see for himself. After confirming his younger brother's findings, Richard alerted their father, who after checking it out for himself, reported it to the local police. He usually walked home with a friend and they put these trap lines up underneath this bridge.
Right.
It's like a highway overhead, over top, and then a river rushing next to it. So it was snowy and he was checking the traps and there was nothing there. I have some pictures of the scene. It's not graphic, it doesn't have the victim there. But if you could describe for the listeners.
Okay, so in the first picture there appears to be some sort of suitcase or freezer bag and it's lying in the snow, and I'm not sure if that's blood next to it or if it's water, because this is in black and white, so I can't quite tell. And so that's the first picture. The second picture goes on to show a different view of it, where it's again the same object that's lying in the snow again, and there's something that's blurred out in there. So there's a blurred out object in there, but it's nestled in amongst some plants. Here's another far away view of the scene, where again we have this object lying partially in a river, mainly on the land, and there is some nearby trees surrounding it.
Thanks for that, Chris. So according to a short documentary about the case published online by Claudia Rivero TV in September 2019, Kenneth Jumper Jr. made a call to a friend, Brent Morn, later that night. The friend was supposed to check the trapline with him that day, but he'd stayed off sick from school. Kenneth told his school friend that he'd found a chopped up body in suitcases. In the interview, Morn recalls Jumper Jr. showing him a Polaroid picture of the woman's severed head the following day on the walk to school.
I remember a picture that he showed me of the head, what appeared to be the head, and it was black hair, dark hair, and it was leaning against a suitcase, and it was quite gruesome. It was, the face looked more or less like meat. I thought it came from him, and back then it would have been a camera of some sort, of Polaroid or something.
So this guy's just showing around pictures of dead bodies at school.
This guy is the only person who said that, but he said it in an interview.
Okay, right.
Police arrived quickly at the scene, where they found 3 suitcases that they determined had likely been thrown from the overpass 300 feet above, probably from a vehicle travelling west along Interstate 80 between the Carbon County and Luzerne County line. One of the 3 suitcases, that of which was determined to contain the head, fetus and buttocks, had burst open on impact. A sketch of the scene in the police report detailed that the head was found next to a rock, the buttocks several feet away, and the fetus just a few feet further. They would discover the rest of the woman's dismembered body shared out between the remaining suitcases. The other suitcases had remained intact and were still zipped shut. The suitcase nearest the Lehigh River contained the arms and legs, and the other, containing the torso, was found around 5 feet away from the case that had exploded on impact. The black and white aerial images contained in the police report show the suitcases were difficult to spot amongst the dark-coloured rocks on a blanket of snow. If one looked at the images without context, there would be nothing noteworthy or interesting about any of them. The suitcases had been spray-painted black, and the handles had been removed. Police were unsure why the killer did this, but looking at the photographs of the area, it can help but wonder if it was a type of camouflage to help them blend in with the surroundings.
Oh.
So Chris, there's 2 images there in front of you. Mm-hmm. One is the suitcases as they were found, spray painted black, and one is what they would have looked like before they were disguised.
Yeah, originally they were kind of what you might expect of a suitcase. They were blue for the most part, with some striping, presumably to identify them when it's going around a carousel in an airport. And another one is a kind of older style one that's sort of tan, potentially leather or suede, opens up in a slightly different way with clasps rather than a zip attached to it. They've all been spray painted black. The blue material ones have been spray painted reasonably effectively. The tan one, not so much. So that tells me that it's probably a more natural material as opposed to a synthetic one.
Yes. So the images depicting what the suitcases originally looked like were circulated in the hope that somebody would be able to figure out where they may have been purchased, but sadly there was never any solid leads. So more about the victim. The woman's breasts had been cut from her chest and they were unaccounted for. Her nose and ears were missing, and they too would never be found. It's unknown why the woman's nose, ears, and breasts were severed and missing. Search online for forum posts and videos about the incident, and in the comments you'll find sleuths speculating that perhaps it was an honor killing, a way to conceal the victim's identity, or possibly even a serial killer keeping trophies.
Would I get it for the hiding of an identity to maim somebody's face?
Yeah.
But would that account for the severing of the breasts?
No.
No.
Exactly. And also teeth, something you can use to identify somebody.
That's very true.
But these were just ideas that people batted around. Another thing would probably be just violence.
Yeah.
Just spite and violence. So the cases were padded with newspaper, straw and packing foam, and they'd landed close to the river, leading officers to determine that the perpetrator had missed his mark when attempting to, perhaps in a rush, dispose of the evidence. The killer likely hoped the dismembered body would remain secure in the cases, go into the river and be swept away. Instead, the body parts lay exposed in the open, waiting to be spotted by the next passing Whitehaven resident.
And remind me, where was this taking place in America?
Pennsylvania.
The
torso and other appendages were wrapped in pages from the September 26th issue of the New York Daily News. The newspaper was later traced back to the North Jersey area. A trip from North Jersey to Whitehaven by car is around 150 miles, and it would take just under 2.5 hours via the I-46 North, and just under 3 hours by the I-80 West. The Pennsylvania police were reported to have debated whether the newspaper was a useful clue or a red herring used to throw them off the scent.
I mean, I do know that New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, that they all interact a lot because it's the tri-state area, and it's not out of the realms of possibility that it could be somebody living in New Jersey coming over to Pennsylvania, but it could be somebody who from Pennsylvania who visited New Jersey, bought the newspaper and went back, or something along those lines.
Exactly.
And for us, when we're talking about it, we're like, 2.5 hours, that's quite a long trip. But that's because we live on a tiny little island. In America, that's like
going to Tesco. So various articles from the time report that the remains of the woman and her husband were loaded into a pickup truck and transported to a nearby hospital. Some reports state that Kenneth Jumper Sr. transported the remains himself, but according to the official police report, it was the coroner who transported the body from the scene. 3 days later, on December 23rd, Assistant Medical Officer Dr. Halbert Fillinger performed an autopsy that took 3 hours to complete. He determined that the cause of death was a manual strangulation. He also determined that the woman had been shot in the neck post-mortem, before being cut into pieces with a fine serrated tool or instrument.
Why would you kill somebody why do you kill somebody post-mortem? Why would you shoot somebody post-mortem?
I could not tell you.
Think to make sure they're dead?
Maybe. I mean...
You'd shoot them in the head, though, wouldn't you, if you wanted to make sure they were dead?
Yeah, I've honestly no clue. I've thought about this a lot, and I'm like, I could not imagine why.
And the only other explanation that I can think of at this time is just violence for fun.
Maybe you're right about them wanting to make sure. Officers working the case commented that the dismemberment was not exactly a slapdash job. The tool used was never identified, and although they commented that the killer was not exactly a surgeon, it seemed as though it may not have been his first time.
Right.
The victim was likely strangled 7 to 8 hours before her decapitated remains were discovered. Some articles state that she'd also been raped.
Okay.
Any thoughts, Chris?
It seems quite quick to be getting rid of that body. If you go into the lengths of all of this, it seems quite a quick turnaround. It doesn't necessarily fit with the image that I had in mind. I sort of thought they would have kept it for a little while and then got rid of it when they needed to. The thing that does come to mind, though, is you said that although not a surgeon, appeared to have some kind of experience in making cuts and incisions and doing this, which just led my mind to think, what profession would that be? And I just want to know, did they check all the butchers in the area?
I don't know if that would be enough to go on to check butchers.
Probably
because
not.
Obviously it's the US, so people hunt.
Yeah.
So the first thing that came to my mind was butcher, serial killer, or hunter. So I was like, I don't know, maybe he's just handy with a saw.
Might be.
So yeah, like you said, it's quite a quick turnaround.
If he didn't pre-prepare all of his stuff, though.
Oh, premeditation.
Premeditated.
Yeah. Sure.
And the other thing as well is, if it's suggested that potentially the newspaper may connect him to New Jersey, and it may be a 2.5 hour drive, that shortens it down even further.
Yes. So there were no identifying documents found at the crime scene. So police were tasked with the job of identifying the victim from just the body itself and the few items found with it. In the meantime, the victim was referred to officially as incident number N3-27244. and was informally known as Beth Doe. She was white, between 4'11" and 5'4", and she was estimated to be around 15 to 25 years old. She was pregnant at the time of murder, weighed 140 to 150 pounds. Despite her young age, she had a lot of dental issues, including gum disease and several extractions. Her issues appeared to have improved over the years, but she still had dental problems that would cause her general pain, including evident tooth decay and a fracture on one of her incisors that would have been visible. Later isotope analysis of the victim's hair, teeth and bones revealed that she had spent her childhood in Europe, likely Serbia or Croatia, before immigrating to the United States. It was estimated that she wasn't yet a teenager when she first reached the US, and that she lived in the South, quite possibly Tennessee, between 5 to 10 years before she was brutally murdered. She had also lived in the South when she was carrying the child.
Okay. Well, that kind of it. My first question was going to be about the teeth thing, because I know that stereotypically American tended to have very good teeth. But if they were coming over from Eastern Europe, that maybe explains a bit why she had problems and then became better later on in life because she moved to a new location where potentially there was better dental care.
This was also the 70s too, though.
Oh, this was the 70s as well?
Yeah. So it's not like the modern standard that we're
fair enough.
used to. But she had a lot of issues. I mean, so she had 2 scars on her left leg, 1 scar over 5 inches long above her heel, and another 2-inch scar further up her calf. The victim's naturally dark brown hair is thought to have been cut by her killer, and later composite sketches released to the public showed her with both longer and chin-length hair. Beth Doe had 2 moles on her face, one above her left eyebrow as well as another on the side of her cheek. The moles may not have been there prior to pregnancy. So Chris, if you could describe the composite sketch.
Sure. So there's 2 sketches side by side here. They both feature the same face, but one's a version with sort of a very short bob. It's got a medium length hair, and the other is with long hair down past the shoulders. It looks like pretty much as you described it. It is a white woman. She doesn't look necessarily what you might call American, but if you hadn't told me otherwise, she could potentially have passed for Native American. She clearly has some quite unique features that you would probably recognize her in a crowd. She does have a mole above her lip on her right side and above her eyebrow on her left side. And yeah, these are composite sketches, but I presume that these can only go so far as to describing her because, as we discussed, her face was maimed.
Exactly. In her left hand, Beth Doe clutched a series of letters and numbers scrawled in ink along the thenar of her inside palm. Investigators would never figure out the meaning of the characters, but not for lack of trying. The letters WSR were legible, but the numbers that followed were more difficult to identify. To the right of the letters was either the number 4 or 7, and slightly beneath in the sequence was the number 4 or 5. The following possible combinations were considered: WSR44, WSR47, WSR54, and WSR57. The police ran the numbers through a license plate database, but turned up no results, and the meaning attributed to the code remains a mystery.
They're not, and obviously you can't answer this because it's a mystery, but you'd have to be pretty on it for it to be some kind of coordinates, and in the 70s you wouldn't have easily accessible devices where you could do that. I would suggest, I don't know, could it be a postcode, a zip code? But at the same time, I'm pretty sure the police would have been able to figure that out quite quickly. I mean, obviously the WSR stands for something, and then the numbers will denote where in that location or where in that place it is, but what that is, don't know. Well,
you pretty much went through the same process as everybody else who's heard this. So we'll get to that.
Okay.
So there's no photograph of Beth Doe's palm. However, the police file contains a sketch of her left hand that reads WSR ##. Investigators are unsure if the victim wrote the numbers and letters on her own palm or if the killer did it to throw them off. If she did write it of her own accord, it would mean that she was right-handed. The meaning of the code, as I said, remains a mystery. So, on to people's theories about the code.
Right.
So armchair detectives and online sleuths batted around ideas about what the acronym could stand for. A popular theory first presented by a Reddit user named Riddleskiddle is that WSR stood for Women's Services and Resources. The user discovered that at the time there was a women's shelter just 2 hours down the I-80. Was Beth Doe maybe fleeing an abusive relationship when she was brutally murdered? Was she attacked by a stranger while attempting to hitchhike? perhaps the violence was closer to home. According to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, 1 in 4 women will be exposed to physical violence, sexual violence, or stalking at the hands of an intimate partner or former partner, with women aged 18 to 24 most at risk. According to statistics, 1 in 4 women will experience intimate partner violence in their lifetime, and 1 in 2 women experiencing intimate partner violence, or IPV, will be murdered at the hands of their partner. In the 1970s, violence against women perpetrated by their partners was considered a private issue that went largely unreported. Shelters and resources for women suffering at the hands of abuse were extremely rare, if non-existent. By the late 70s, however, dozens of shelters had sprung up in response to feminist groups protesting against violence towards women in their own homes, making the online sleuth theory that WSR could have stood for Women's Services and Resources a plausible one. So in March 2005, the American Journal of Public Health published the results of a study performed in the early 90s that stated outside of complications faced during childbirth, homicide was the main cause of death for pregnant women in the US.
Wow.
Later studies report that 20% of pregnant women died at the hands of their partners or ex-partners. These studies revealed that men who murder their pregnant partners tend to do so because they do not want to have children or they want to hide an adulterous affair from their wife and family. The homicides are usually spontaneous and violent. So Chris, from everything you've heard so far, what do you think happened? Like, what is your opinion?
From the evidence that you've kind of put in front of me today, I mean, there's the obvious thing that it could just be a serial killer. It could just be somebody who's she was walking down the wrong road, or she spoke to the wrong person and ended up a result. However, given that statistical evidence they just put in front of me, it would probably lead me to think that the chief suspects would be either her current or former partners.
Yeah, so before the case was solved, this is what I wrote in my notes research. So I wrote, statistically, the story of Beth Doe's homicide could very well be the story of a young woman pregnant by an older man who already had a family of his own, perhaps rejected by her family, and just days from giving birth without anyone to support her, she packed her worldly possessions into 3 suitcases and travelled to the home of the baby's father, hoping he would step up to his role. Perhaps when she arrived, he was less than happy to see her, and before he knew it, his hands were around her throat in a violent fit of rage. He didn't want his wife or girlfriend to find out about his extramarital affairs. He didn't want a child, so he killed the pregnant teenager with his bare hands and shot her in the neck as she likely spasmed just to make sure she was dead. Then he panicked. He needed to get rid of the body. He emptied the suitcases of her things, sprayed them black. After all, someone may have seen her travelling with them. He knew he would have to dismember her to fit her in the suitcases, so he got to work severing her head, angrily cutting off her nose from her face, severing her ears, and hacking off her breasts. He put them aside as tokens of the crime, began separating the limbs from the torso, sharing the body parts into 3 cases. He grabbed an old newspaper, padded out the cases, put in some packing foam. He took a blanket that the young woman had packed and used it to wrap up the morbid parcel. He didn't want to bury the remains, probably needed to get rid of them quickly to put distance between himself and the crime. He needed to get the body away from both his residence and the county he lived, so he cut the handles of the cases, loaded them into his vehicle before driving along the I-80 bridge in Carbon County that straddled the Lehigh River, got out of his car, tossed the case into the river, took off into the night as if none of it had ever happened. But the cases didn't land in the river and he missed his mark. He knew it would be okay, nobody knew the 2 were connected, and no one would ever recognize the girl with the disfigurement he'd done to her face. After taking the lives of Beth Doe and her unborn child, he went home to get on with his.
I think that sounds like the most likely scenario. When you say that he put the identifying features and breasts aside as trophies of the crime.
Yeah, that's more of a serial killer.
Yeah, that's more of a serial killer thing. So,
but I just couldn't understand why he would do that.
I mean, the only thing I could think of there would be that he did put them to one side, but rather as trophies, he then burned them or disposed of them in a separate location or something like that, which have never been uncovered. I suppose that's the, if you want to put it this way, smart thing to do, which is to hide the unidentifiable parts one place and the identifiable parts somewhere else.
Yeah. I think my idea was that he may have had a history of it.
Yeah.
Because that is a...
Well, that would fit in with the idea that he didn't seem to be a beginner at this.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, when you lay it out like that, it all sounds well and good, but then you start thinking about the logistics of it, and you're like, right, we need to cut up a body now. It's easy to write those things down on paper, but in reality, to do it in such a short time frame,
you've got
to know what you're doing.
Exactly. So at the time I was researching this, before it was solved, I contacted Trooper Brian V. Knoll of the Criminal Investigation Assessment Unit for the Pennsylvania State Police. Now, Knoll took over as the Criminal Assessment Unit Officer in Troop N in January of 2019. So in his own words, he says,
"My responsibilities in this position include responding to active homicide cases throughout the troop, as well as overseeing missing person cases and cold cases. I have a very general familiarity with the case just based on its notoriety. This is one of the most heinous murders in Pennsylvania's history. The troopers I took over put a lot of work into this case, and I feel a weight of responsibility to keep pushing the case forward and resolve it."
Trooper Knoll told me that he would happily answer any questions I had about the case and that any attention I or anyone else could bring to the long, unsolved homicide was welcome. He currently sees over 45 cold cases.
That's scary how people can literally get away with murder.
Yeah. Even though this is solved, he's got away with it since the 70s. Crazy. So the murder of Beth Doe was the case that he received the most tips about. I was curious since 3 separate people had been physically present at the crime scene before reporting their findings to the police if Trooper Knoll believed the scene had been disturbed or tampered with in any way. I also asked him about the Polaroid picture of Beth Doe's head that Jumper Jr.'s friend claimed that he'd seen. And Trooper Knoll said, "We have no reason to believe that any photographs were taken by the Jumpers or that anything was tampered with. My best guess is that Mahone may be misremembering where and when he saw the photo, as there was one eventually released to try and identify her."
I see.
Yeah. Over the past several years, hundreds of long unsolved cold cases have been solved nationwide with the help of genetic genealogy databases. When I asked Trooper Knoll about the role of the new technology in the case, he told me, "It can be frustrating because all of this is relatively new and there isn't anything specifically budgeted for this type of testing." So I asked him about the possibility of crowdsourcing funds, and although he agreed it would probably be possible to raise the money, he added that current policies did not yet allow for the acceptance of such donations. He said it's a topic that is currently under consideration as the science becomes more prevalent. The current testing, which includes attempts to obtain a viable DNA profile for Beth Doe for purposes of genealogical research, is being funded by the Carbon County's coroner's office, he said. I asked about baby Doe and if she'd suffered any injuries, and he told me that the baby was intact, bar some incisions that had likely occurred during Beth Doe's murder. According to Knoll, there were no solid suspects in the case. But, of course,
Dun dun dun!
on the internet, people can always find a suspect. So, when I was searching online, I happened upon this Reddit post by a user on a throwaway account named Germaine Siviens. The user made a post to the Unsolved Mystery subreddit in 2017 titled, "How long is too long for an investigator to head the investigation into an unsolved case?" In an aggravated tone, the user, who claims to be a Whitehaven resident with a strong belief that they know the victim's killer, shows irritation and disappointment towards the lead investigator at the time handling the Beth Doe murder. The user goes on to accuse the now deceased son of a popular, well-liked doctor in the area of murdering the unidentified woman and her unborn child. They then linked a list of unidentified murder victims, a Wikipedia article, referring to the unsolved murder of a young woman in 1976, and she was the Davidson County Jane Doe. And he said, "No one seems to know or care that Wikipedia lists in its unsolved murders a Latina victim found in Tennessee a few months prior to Beth Doe's murder. The Davidson County Jane Doe was a Hispanic or Latino teenager named Sherry or Cheryl, who drowned under suspicious circumstances in Tennessee in March of 1976. Before she was found dead, she'd been seen in the company of another girl, and the pair claimed that they had fled a rehab center in St. Paul, Minnesota, and came to Tennessee, which is over a 900-mile journey."
That'd be over into the country.
They claimed to be heading in the direction of Haines County, Florida, before the Davidson County Doe was found dead. Her unidentified acquaintance was never identified or seen again, so this user seemed to believe that Beth Doe could have been the Davidson County Doe's runaway friend. However, descriptions state the unidentified girl had sandy blonde hair. The user believes that the girls ran away from the Hazelton Betty Ford Foundation Center in St. Paul, what the user referred to as a fashionable rehab, attracting affluent Americans and Europeans, and that they would have met their killer there, which to me just doesn't, I don't know where this connection comes
Sounds
from.
a bit of a stretch, but...
Exactly. That's what I thought. I mean, I know they're a Whitehaven resident and everything, but... So the user went on to explain themselves in the comment section under the post after a flurry of questions from other users. Like, everybody started commenting on this post, like, wanting to critique his idea. Germaine Siviens claimed to have known an influential woman in the area who had dated the son of the doctor whom they believed to be Beth Doe's killer. The doctor's son allegedly spent time in Hazelden, the rehab. The user goes on to provide anecdotal and circumstantial evidence that, whether fact or fiction, piqued the interest of other sleuths following the case. The user claimed the doctor's son had issues with drugs and alcoholism that led to an unstable personality, a morbid fascination with knives, repeated incidents of self-harm and attempted suicide, access to multiple used cars for him by his father, as well as a family cabin near the Lehigh River.
Okay.
The user also claimed that the doctor's son was something of a writer or photographer, and his manuscripts were allegedly filled with violent imagery and sharp implements, and his photography focused on close-ups of noses and breasts.
Okay, right.
One curious user, called Altwolf, managed to track down an old event calendar featuring such a photography exhibit along with the suspect's name. The user continued to explain the female friend in question was assaulted by the doctor's son and not believed by local police when she went to report the incident. Germaine Siviers continued to explain that the doctor's son would photograph parts of his female friend close up, scroll codes across her skin. He claimed his friend had outright asked the doctor's son if he had killed Beth Doe, as some details, such as him impregnating a younger Boston-based girl in the 70s, the codes and close-up of the body parts, and a penchant for knives and violent sexual acts made him a suspect. Rather than answering yes or no, he threatened her life. She then went to the police but was dismissed. Several years later, he claimed she went once again and that the doctor's son was taken in questioned for over 3 hours and nothing came of it. So I was like, I really dislike these kind of like, you know, these posts online that are like, they sound like, yeah, definitely, this could be the answer. They sound like a fit, but then nothing ever comes of it. So I asked Trooper Null about it, and he said,
I don't know who posted it. The female friend he refers to was determined to not be credible and was suspected of having some mental health issues. She provided numerous specific details regarding the alleged suspect and the case that was supposedly told to her by the suspect that were not consistent with the scene or murder. 2 other people were interviewed to rule it out, including the alleged suspect and his father. It's only a few pages of the report. Anytime we got any theory or tip over the years, there were similar efforts to investigate and rule them out. It seems like it was taken seriously and properly vetted. It seems like something and nothing. I mean, all of those things seem to, fit together, but as Trooper Knoll says, this is a not credible witness. And they didn't seem to have any insight on anything that the police didn't already know at this point anyway, unless you're going to tell me something different in a moment. But it seems like a little bit of a witch hunt at this point.
Yeah, I think it's just unsolved for so long that it's kind of strange, because it's nice to get a look like behind the scenes of what the police actually do, because sometimes you read about a case and you see the suspects that fit and you wonder if they've been vetted and questioned. Yeah, they usually are. So we can probably just let go of it and let the police do their job in a lot of cases. Obviously there's some where the help of civilians and such like really does benefit a case and help it get solved, but now with the advancements in technology and DNA technology, can get a cold case solved pretty easily these days. So Beth Doe and Baby Doe lay buried in a grave marked with a simple white cross in a cemetery in Weatherly for decades. In 2007, her remains were exhumed and taken to a lab at the University of Texas Center for Human Identification in Fort Worth. A DNA profile was developed using isotopic testing, which involves extracting DNA from teeth, bones, and hair. The profile was then entered into an international database. Unfortunately, their entry turned up no results, but they were able to figure out some details about the victim. 8 days after the discovery, the Pinocchio record reported that police believe the victim to be of Spanish or Italian parentage.
Okay, so not Eastern European.
We start to get a lot of conflicting information at this point. So various other articles at the time report Beth Doe of being a general Mediterranean heritage. 2015, Beth Doe's case was reviewed again and an updated image of the victim was created and circulated online. This led to, in April of 2019, a woman named Jane Faust coming forward and contacting the Pennsylvania police saying she thought the unidentified woman may be a girl named Maggie Cruz. Maggie Cruz was a 16-year-old foster child named Madeline Maggie Cruz who ran away from her Framingham, Massachusetts home. Rumours she was pregnant and nobody ever heard from her again. It wasn't her. Maggie Cruz did look strikingly like the composite sketches of Beth Doe, and the Pennsylvania police thought that they had finally identified her. However, a few months later, a public statement was released ruling her out as the victim. In April of 2021, the identity of Beth Doe was revealed to be 15-year-old Evelyn Collin. Collin was identified through her nephew's DNA using genetic genealogy services. Louis Collin Jr. was born a few years after Beth Doe was murdered. He said, "About 4 years ago, I heard about the DNA stuff and I wanted to see, hey, this would be an awesome tool if I could connect with family, and specifically connect with my cousin." He thought she was still alive.
Okay.
And he said, because I knew she had a kid or cousins or maybe multiple children. So thinking that Beth was still alive, or Evelyn, as we now know, he entered his DNA and thought, maybe I'll get a match.
Is this on like Ancestry.com or something, right?
Ancestry or MyHeritage or...
whatever, yeah. Oh, wow.
He was shocked when instead of tracking down his living relatives, he was instead notified that he was connected to a homicide victim.
Wow, okay.
The family said they had never heard of the case of Beth Doe.
Okay, so she just disappeared from a family and they had no idea that she'd been murdered.
Yes. Evelyn Collin's family believed that she had ran away from her home in New Jersey to start a new life elsewhere. She was pregnant by her 19-year-old boyfriend, Louis Sierra, and the pair had moved in together. So she was young.
Yeah.
Yeah. But apparently her nephew said that's what they did back then, you know. If you fell pregnant with a partner, you moved in with them. No questions asked. So Evelyn's mother would often visit them at their apartment, but one day they were no longer there and neighbours informed her that the young couple had moved out. Yeah, but they were in contact. They were in regular contact.
Oh, so just one day just disappeared.
Apparently, Evelyn had contacted her mum saying, oh, could you bring over some soup? She shows up and they're gone and they've moved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Right, okay.
Soon after this, Evelyn's mother received a letter written in Spanish, assuring her that everything was okay and that Evelyn had given birth to a boy, and said, we'll contact you if we need to, basically cutting off ties, saying we'd moved. There was a rumour that she'd moved to Connecticut or something.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So the letter said she no longer wanted to have contact with her family, and that was the last they ever heard. However, Evelyn couldn't write.
Right, okay.
Yeah, she couldn't write. So it was assumed Sierra wrote the letter himself. Her family admitted that they believed the contents of the letter and hoped that one day Evelyn would just get in touch, but she never did. She was never reported missing for this reason.
Wow, okay. That's bizarre. I mean, if I put myself in that situation, even if I thought it was consensual, that she'd wanted to cut off ties, I'd still be reporting this to the police.
Yeah.
Just on the off chance that it wasn't.
Yeah, her nephew said that, it was a thing that people did back then. They just went to start afresh. But to suddenly receive a letter saying, yeah, I've had a boy, I've had a baby, don't contact me again.
That seems like covering tracks, to be honest. I mean, I suppose that's the impetus of them not filing a police report.
Yeah.
But as you say, the fact that she couldn't read or write.
Maybe they thought that someone had wrote it by dictation,
Possibly. But you would mention that. You'd say, I'm dictating this to a friend or something like that.
Yeah. Apparently her nephew said that her grandma would cry all the time, thinking about her, and they were really upset that she didn't want to know the family anymore. So they've lived all this time thinking that she was out there living her life fine, just not wanting to see the family.
So where's the boyfriend?
Sierra, who is now 63, maybe 64 years old now, was arrested in Queens, New York on March the 31st, 2021. He was charged with 1 count of criminal homicide. When initially questioned, Sierra claimed he didn't even know an Evelyn Collin. Later, he confessed that the two lived together but said he hadn't seen her since he left for work one day and returned to an empty apartment. Sierra is currently being held in New York, but he's going to be extradited to Carbon County. I don't know if he's been extradited already. But at the time of his arrest, he was living with his wife and 2 children.
Right. He went on to...
lived his life and literally thought he got away with murder all this time.
And, well, to be fair, he did.
He did.
For a long time. And only because of this, just happenstance that DNA technology advanced to the point that you can literally send in a swab and find out, I mean, we've both done it, to find out, our heritage and if, connected to anybody and so on. And that's what's led to, the arresting currently of this guy.
But imagine signing up for Ancestry, putting in your sample, and thinking, oh, I'm going to find my long lost relatives, and then the police contact you with this horrific story. And Beth Doe was the biggest case in Whitehaven, I guess, and probably the general area,
County,
but they'd never heard of it. Imagine to find out that this was your relative and then Googling the case.
Oh,
it's just horrific.
Be awful. But it's amazing that police can use it in that way and to help solve cold cases.
Yeah, they solve a lot of cold cases that way.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So that is the story of Beth Doe. Evelyn Collin finally has a name back after all this time, and
well, thank God, quite frankly, that it's been solved. I mean, it's terrible, the death of the young woman and an unborn child as well.
It's horrific, honestly.
But I suppose if you can take any solace in it at all, at least now it's finally, seemingly, been solved and justice will be brought.
And I'm so glad that this guy's finally been arrested for what he did back then. So thanks for listening, Chris.
Thank you. It's something different for us. If this is your first time listening to us, this is our first time covering a true crime episode. We'll do some more in the future, I'm sure, because this has been fascinating. We often tend to cover some more unusual things like alien abductions or uncontacted tribes or all sorts of things. So please do check out our back catalogue, and I'm sure there'll be something that you like there. Just take your fancy.
Yep, usually we do quite light-hearted cases and with a lot of comedy to it. But yeah, this was requested by listeners, so if you want more true crime, just let us know. We'll do a poll anyway. Or if you want us to continue with the light-hearted stuff, you can vote for that too.
We'll be doing a mix, so feel free to send in your suggestions to our Instagram. But for today's episode, that's it. So thank you very much, Linz.
You're welcome, and yeah, stay safe out there, everybody.
Stay safe. Bye.
Bye.